Hi friends, welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and today we're looking at the Real Steel AKUMA. This is a large liner lock knife. It comes in this black with orange liner accents, or a nice deep OD green with the accents as well. It's a nice drop point blade. This video is probably going to be a little longer than usual. Please watch the whole thing. I try to include a lot of good information. I've got stuff in there that you might want to hear. Maybe a little bit of a rabbit trail or two, but there's a lot of good stuff about this knife. If you're interested in getting one of these, I got mine from White Mountain Knives. You can too save 10% with coupon code CCE, and that's the cheapest price I could find in the world. I've got other links for other places around the globe as well. Well, North America and Europe, basically, is what I got links for. Without any further ado, I did that sort of with the hole in the blade. I don't talk about that in the review, but with a little bit of a wrist flick and letting go of that hole with the middle finger, I can make the blade deploy that way or the other ways that I'll show you in just a minute. Keep watching. This is not a small knife. It's not super huge either, but it is a big knife. This handle, the way, it's really deep most of the way along. I think it's really mostly comfortable for people who have men's large to extra large hand sizes, unless you really like big knives. It certainly is a very good fit for my hand size, and, there's still leftover handle. So I could hold it back here and get extra reach if I wanted to, or, sneak up, get my thumb on the spine of the blade, because we keep most of the thickness, at least 2/3 of the length of the knife, and you can do some hard work. With this full flat grind, it slices very well, and it's thin enough behind the edge. It's actually very thin behind the edge, and that's one of the reasons why it slices so very, very well. It's sharpened okay. It's not a very good sharpening that they did. A lot of variability along the length. But because they actually made it sharp and it's so thin, it slices very well. With the tip coming down with this drop point and this belly not being super sharp up, it does okay at piercing things as well if you need to, puncture things. If you need to do some delicate work, you can sneak up or even use this hole as a bit of a pinch point, and it actually gives you greater control. And so that hole, it's mostly decorative, I think, but and weight reduction, but it works really well. Of course, the satin finish leaves my fingerprints all over the place, but that's par for the course. The writing on the knife. There's the logo there for BRAGINETS. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be, actually. It looks like it's some kind of deer kind of symbol. And then, the name is along the ricasso in line with the plunge. And at the top here, it says K110. K110 is a Chinese version of D2. It's chemically very close to D2. So if you like D2, this is pretty much the same thing. It is a carbon steel, and, it's pretty hard. The Rockwell hardness on this is, I think, between 59 and 61, so that's quite good. We've got a nice, clean, narrow plunge, so this plunge here doesn't take a lot of space, a lot of width. So it's a small sharpness choil, but that's all it needs, and it's done very well. We've got a thumb stud here on the left side, on the right side only, for right-handed deployment. Works wonderfully. This detent is softer than I'd like it to be, and probably softer than it should be, but it's still very functional, as you can see. There's also this flipper back here, and it's a fairly unique flipper. We've got some jimping across the top of it, and a large, well, compared to this jimping on the spine, that's a larger cutout there. Makes it very easy to get your finger behind there and get some grip and deploy the blade. Very lightly like that, where it just barely pulled, or of course, you can certainly make the blade just come flying out. I tried just doing the press thing, and you press, but then your finger gets caught in this little bit of a well. You've got the internal chamfering here so that your finger can sit in there. It makes it good for getting a little bit better grip back here, even though there's not jimping. But it means that the only way to deploy it with the flipper is a light switch style. Nothing wrong with that. The thumb stud is just on the one side, so you've got a T6 screw here. And I found that I was not sure where I was going to clamp it on my sharpening system. I do have clamps that are made for full flat grinds, but they don't always work the best. And with how thick this is, the angle is a little greater than my clamps would like, but it's so super easy to take the thumb stud out, and then it could clamp along this flat, thick section, and just one more clamp over here just to steady it, and it's easy to put back on. So that thumb stud, while I would prefer that lefties got some love for thumb studs as well, at least it's easy to take off so I can easily sharpen the knife. I had to put it up on my sharpener to measure the grind angles and all the variability. If you don't know how I measure the sharpness from the factory or the grind angles from the factory, I've got a video about that. I'll leave a link for it up here right now. At least I'll try to. It will also be down below in the video description. So this blade shape is very functional. It's an excellent shape. The handle here, it's sort of what I call a candy bar style handle. It's not straight by any means, but there's just a slight arch on the back. And then there's that internal radius on the belly. There's no guard of any kind except for the fact that it gets a little bit thicker on the end. So if you do a lot of puncturing, you probably want a guard. Or don't use this knife for a lot of puncturing. But it comes thin enough here that if you grip it well, you can puncture a lot of different things quite safely, just as long as you grip right in the middle of there. And there you go. We've got orange liners and then G10 on the surface. Well, they're both G10, the orange G10 and then black G10. This side is only G10, and this side has got a liner that comes back and it covers this area and not the back end of it. We've got a back spacer that it's perfect. It just, you run your thumb across there, and depending on where you are, you just barely get a tiny little catch. And then they've put in a little trench along there, sort of like a fuller. And then we've got a rounded radius here. It's not just a chamfer. It's nice and rounded, very comfortable. Back here we've got the lanyard post. It's an hourglass-shaped lanyard post. Very well done. We've got pocket clip. It's a deep pocket clip. It's a little bit unique of a pocket clip. It screws in at the back here. That's also a T6 screw. It stands off far enough to work well. I don't particularly like that the end of it comes up and terminates as a pointy thing. Most grips, it was just fine, but sometimes I did find that it poked just a little bit in here. Not enough to, really complain, but it's a tiny irritant. Very minor, not a big deal at all. Let's see what it looks like going into a pocket. It wants to climb over thanks to that little lip coming up. And then there you go. It hides. Let's put it right in the back. That small clip belies the size of knife that you have. Of course, when you're standing up, people can look in a little bit and maybe see a little bit of that orange. What else do we have? The screws on here. We've got slotted screws, and that's how you take it apart. To take it apart, you're going to want to get the flat or standard screwdriver. You're going to want to get a driver that fits as well as you can so it doesn't have room to wiggle back and forth along the length of it or up and down that way. That's how you get cam out with slotted screws if you don't have the right size. So I found a driver that is just the right size, and so that will fit in there. And a smaller one right here, and that one's not quite as perfect of a fit. There's some play in it, but I'll be able to get it apart. Before I take it apart, let's do our size comparison with the Ontario Rat 1. There you go. It's a very similar sized knife. You got very much the same length. You've got more cutting edge, and it's just a tiny bit thinner in the handle than the Ontario Rat. Let's take some time. I'll turn off the camera, take this apart, show you the insides, and then we'll do the measurements and give you my pros and cons. So keep watching. So there you go. Like I said, this side is just G10. So they've got a race washer on this side so that the bearings can run on that. We've got ceramic ball bearings, double row ball bearings. So that helps with lateral stability and a little better rolling. And the stop pin is one of those captured stop pins right there. And it runs in that little groove. Here's the liners, so they help to keep the weight down through this liner on this side. You know, there's weight reduction holes, and it's smaller than the knife handle. So we've got the G10 showing off over here. Got a nice big D there, and there's the back spacer, and there's a screw right there. That's a T6 screw right there, so that you can unscrew the back spacer. So that's quite nice that it's attached. That's attached to the steel here of the liner, so helps keep it together. Nice, heavy screws. Well made, good construction methods, good design. Oh, ceramic detent as well. You're going to notice a slightly different sound now. Actually, not that time. It thunks a little bit more when I open it. And that's because this knife had the detent so weak that I could just hold it on the handle and do a hard wrist flick and come to a stop, and the blade would come out, which Canada Border Services Agency makes the determination that that is an illegal knife because it's a centrifugal opening knife. I won't talk about why that's wrong in physics and everything, but that's fine. All I did was the lock arm here, held it at the point where it turns flat, and I just pulled it back a bit and trained it. So now there's a little more pressure on the spring here pushing that way. And now you hold the handle, it just won't come out. I go as hard as I can standing up, and the blade does not come out. So it fully complies with Canadian law. Even if it's misinterpreted Canadian law, it still fully complies. So there's that. It's a lot of knives that get stopped at the border as centrifugal knives simply don't have a strong enough detent, and that's all that it is. If you like a really soft detent, you just leave it soft. Or you can do the exact opposite of training the spring to push that way. You can take the whole thing apart and train it back just a little bit. Warning, you have to be super careful that you don't over fatigue that point, because then it's going to get work hardened and then it's going to break and your knife will be garbage. You can destroy a knife by trying to strengthen the detent. So just a few more things before we do the measurements. Blade centering, pretty close to perfect. The texture on the surface, this sort of hash checkering kind of texture, really good grip. I was looking at my notes and I missed the flipper. There we go. So now let's do the sizes, measurements, and stuff. I'll try to go through this fairly quickly. 118 grams, 4.15 ounces. So big knife, just over 4 ounces. Sharpness from the factory, 80. That's very good, very sharp from the factory. The length of the cutting edge, 90.2 millimeters. That's 3.551 inches. The blade length tipped to the closest spot on the handle, which is down here at the bottom, 94.6 millimeters, 3.724 millimeters. The blade thickness up here at the ricasso, the flat area, is 3.65 millimeters. That's 0.144 inches. The blade depth, its biggest right here in the middle, that is 27 millimeters. That's 1.063 inches. The thickness behind the grind, about a third of the way up from the heel, 0.37 millimeters, 14.5 thousandths of an inch. Yeah, that's a big reason why it slices so very well. The grind angles. Well, on this side, it starts at 16.1, quarter way down, 15 degrees, 3/4 of the way down, 17.5 degrees, and at the tip, 23 degrees. This side, it starts at 15 degrees, 17.5, 23.6, and 23.7. So yeah, they didn't sharpen it very well as in grind angle terms, but they got it sharp. This is like D2, so I'd probably sharpen it between 18 and 20 degrees per side, and then it would just be wonderful. The handle length, 121.5 millimeters, 4.783 inches. The grip area, it's around 11 centimeters, almost 4.5 inches. The thickness of the handle on the G10, 13.2 millimeters, that's 0.52 of an inch, so it's not super thick. I like that. The handle depth, it's actually biggest right up here, 31.3 millimeters, which is 1.232 inches. When the knife is closed, the biggest spot is right in the middle here, 34.7 millimeters, 1.366 inches. And the total length of the knife, 215.1 millimeters, 8.469. So basically 8.5 inches long with 3 3/4 inch blade. So yeah, it's a bigger knife. I quite like it that way. My pros and cons and thoughts and stuff. Is it worth the price? I think so. The pocket grip, the pocket clip, I like it and I don't like it. I like it because, it looks good. It's just a nice clip. I wish they would have supplied 2 of them. If they would have put a little hole on either side, the pocket clip would cover it. And like Cold Steel often supplies 2 pocket clips, one right, one left. They just do that almost all the time. I would have liked this to have that same stylized clip, but just a second one, so lefties could have it there. Even if it doesn't have a lefty thumb stud, lefties can still do that, right? So a little bit of lefty love would have been a very good thing. Just, it's functionally very good. It's comfortable, it's got a good grip. The blade shape is just very good. By the way, there's no problem with the flipper. I'm often looking way over to the left at my notes, and then I'm not concentrating, and that's why I'm slipping off. Comfortable for, big hands. It's okay for medium-sized hands too, but it's very comfortable for large and extra large hands. You get extra reach if you want it. And when you sneak up, you're fairly close to the cutting edge if you're up here. Good weight for the size. Oh, by the way, some little things like, see this angle? These angles at the top here? So the blade has got that little angle matched right there. And it's almost matched all the way across there. So it's nice and smooth, fairly well closed off for dirt getting in there. And then when you deploy the blade, that matches right there again with the handle. That's actually harder to do than it might seem at first glance. Having everything matching up nicely and then opening it and it still matches up very well. Nice clean look. I like the extra grip there. It's a good knife. The cons, like I said, I'd like a left thumb stud if they would have just made it a little bit differently. The detent was too soft, but it's great now. Some people might want a guard. I don't know if that's a con or not. That's just a fact. So if you'd want a guard, it doesn't have it. The pivot screw was coming a little bit loose, but and when it was loose, there was a little bit of blade play. You can add your own VC3 thread mate or Loctite. I talked about it in the previous video, how purple Loctite is what you really want. It's a cool, good knife that I like quite a lot. Oh, I just thought of something else that I didn't mention. Oh, yes, the lock release. I didn't mention that before. There's a nice cutaway here for deploying the blade with the thumb stud. But right here, there's some jimping on the top, and there's lots of room. Very easy to get your thumb in there to disengage that lock. I really like how well they made that. I think I would have liked, like I said, taken a little bit of this away, do a similar thing on this side, maybe not quite as much, and make it left friendly. In hand, I actually like it better in the left hand than the right, and that's partly because this cutaway, it's just good for the index finger right there, and I just get a better grip that way, I think. So most righties, you have knives with this, and it's just more comfortable on the left. So there you go. That's one thing all you righties miss and us lefties get. Oh, by the way, there's a very tiniest, almost immeasurable, tiny bit of recurve right here. I don't know if the person sharpening it took away too much steel here and stopped at the end, but it's very easy. This, I can use my 2-inch wide stones and sharpen this no problem with this small degree of recurve. And most sharpening systems have 1.5 inch wide stones. So if I can do it with a 2-inch, you can do it with a regular stone. So there you go. Thanks, Real Steel, for making a nice knife. Please, if this sells well enough, bring this out with a good stainless steel. To all my supporters, thank you so much. Patreon, or if you're choosing to support me through YouTube, as a YouTube member, I appreciate it very, very much. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. All those things are not just a mantra that YouTubers put on the end of videos or at the beginning or whatever. It really does help. So please do those things, and thank you so much for those that do them. And remember, friends, cut towards your chum, not your thumb.